From classic whodunits to modern psychological thrillers, each episode offers exclusive insights, behind-the-scenes stories, and discussions on the art of crafting compelling crime narratives. Whether you're a seasoned investigator or a newcomer to the genre, Books to Die For is your ultimate guide to the thrilling world of crime literature.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is here. Take the chains. He's running the show.
Oh no, you're the man. I'm just in the house watching your genius, your broadcasting prowess.
I'm not professional of anything.
That may not be true. Those days back when we were in San Francisco or the streets of Seattle.
Yeah, walking the streets, but that was something different.
Yeah, absolutely different kind of profession.
Yeah. I belong to the union. Well, speaking of unions, listen, we've got a Canadian writer. We've got Mr. Andrew Buckley here, and he's going to talk about his new book, and we're looking forward to it. So, Andrew, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So, Havelok, it's kind of a spy espionage sort of book, kind of, I guess you would call it. And what drew you into that category to write?
It was early in my writing career when I actually wrote this manuscript. It was something that I'd had on my mind for quite some time. I came from a background where I wrote a lot of satirical, absurdist kind of fiction, paranormal fantasy, and that kind of thing. So this was a departure. My literary agent at the time was not thrilled by it at all, because it was not in line with the genre that I was writing most commonly. It was very different style-wise. But it's something that just burned into my brain, and I'd always had this idea about, what if James Bond did actually impregnate one of those Bond girls over the years, and what would happen to that child, and how would they grow up not knowing their father, and what kind of person would they turn out to be? And the consequence was Havelock, which basically follows this girl's journey as she goes in search for her father and infiltrates MI6 and helps them avert a world arms disaster.
How do you get into the mindset of a female character like that when they're the main character, especially?
That was part of the problem that my literary agent had with me writing this book. They made me first publish it under a pen name of Jane D. Everly because they didn't think readers would accept a male writing a strong female protagonist. So this is basically a rewritten version of that. It was on the market for like 6 months, and I pulled it way back in 2015. So this is, I guess, in a sense, a republication, but it's a new version. I basically took a lot of the traits from different action stars over the years and different spy thrillers that I'd read. I used to read a lot of William Dial novels when I was younger, and I really liked the kind of hard-nosed characters that he wrote, whether they were male or female. You can suspend disbelief in certain ways as to, a 140-pound female taking down a 200-pound male. But I liked the idea of somebody who could think their way around problems, as well as being sassy and sexy and a badass. And I just took the traits that I would have, I really loved in those spy thrillers and those characters, and just kind of imbued it into the character of Eliana Havelock. We did, a bit of James Bond kind of element to it, where she is, he was a womanizer. She's also a bit of a womanizer, but that kind of sensibility that she had about her, that she was no nonsense, pulls no punches, goes for what she wants.
So what was the issues that you had writing from your paranormal, fantasy, satirical, whimsical world to writing the espionage book? What did you find different or challenging or easy?
I found it very difficult to write without imbuing humor into it. I write humor very naturally and very easily. It's a genre that I've always been drawn to. Breaking away from that and applying it to something where it was serious issues, or it had to at least appear to be serious issues, and the characters were dealing with serious problems and life and death in a way that was not whimsical or absurd. I found that a little bit tricky at first. But getting into those characters, and the way I wrote it was Eliana Havelock's chapters are from first person and everybody else is from third person limited, which was another issue that my literary agent had at that particular time. I was a real headache back then. And it definitely was something that was a challenge, but that's also partially why I wanted to do it. And I I had conversations with the Ian Fleming estate over what I could and couldn't say in relation to the James Bond character. And it was all good conversations, of course. It was an interesting experiment for me to do, but you have a story in your brain and you just have to get it out. It's just one of those scenarios. I really wanted this character to be on paper.
Just for the record, my first Spy Devils book in my espionage series, someone actually titled their review "A Whimsical Spy Thriller."
Whimsical?
Yep, they used the word whimsical because I put humor in it because there was sarcastic, dark humor in it. Because I worked to get through the stress of the job, you live on dark humor. You have to let it's like MASH, like the whole you were that way or you go nuts. Well, overstating, but there was a lot of that sort of. So I put that in the book, and that was just different than the bang bang shoot 'em up. When you find humor coming easily, you don't think that might be an element of your character in any situations. Did it creep through at all because of the situations you're putting a new character in?
Yeah, in much the same way that you're describing the sarcasm and the sass that kind of goes with it. I've never met anybody funnier than a mortician, because their job is so freaking dark. But the gentleman who was in charge of my father's funeral like 8-9 years ago, the dude was hilarious. But I'm like, man, the stuff this guy must deal with, I guess he has to be that. And so when I wrote that book, I mean, there was the humor crept through anyways. I'm naturally sarcastic and growing up in England, and I wanted that for the character anyways. And they're dealing with these horrible situations. They're in these life and death situations. Like you said, it's how you deal. Humor is how we deal with a lot of common problems and difficulties in life. So why wouldn't it come through in the character? So yeah, absolutely.
Are you careful about your timing then? Like when you're writing the humor in this sort of a book, it's got to be at the right place and time, right?
Of course, you can't be cracking jokes at the serious moments, but you have to be giving it a sense of levity at the moments when, it really needs it. So yeah, there is definitely a timing element that's attached to that. Like Joe said, I mean, it's the dark humor side of it is something that just tends to crop up, I think, in those situations. But humor is all about timing anyway. It's all about when to make the joke and when to hold back or when to pause.
You had a story. Did the character come second then? Did you think about it at the same time? It's all it's like, oh, character story first, your character first. But it is important because some people, they're just different. And sometimes when it comes up with something unique in the creation of a character or of a story first.
I had the character from doing research into Fleming's work. So I read the entire, everything that he wrote, all his novels and all his short stories, and I went through the entire thing, trying to find out what the best through line would be for introducing, this external character into this kind of a world. So the character of Eliana Havelock was based on the short story from For Your Eyes Only, and so I was able to kind of back end the character into that kind of out of that scenario, I suppose. But the actual story was something totally different. I had this idea for a screenplay because I originally was trained as a screenwriter. That's what I went to school for, and I had this idea for a script called The Trigger Effect. Where nanotechnology got to the point where you could program a pill, give it to somebody, and it would give them a certain amount of triggers that would allow them to accomplish a mission or do something specific. And so basically I took that concept and that became part of the story in Havelok and became the main issue where that the antagonist was trying to, introduce this into the market and was causing all kinds of havoc across the world with it.
So does your main character have a purpose for the reader? Something you want them to take away from this character?
Yeah, the ingenuity and the creativity of her character, I think, is wonderful. Her ability to think her way around situations and get out of problems in a creative way, not in a, I'm going to shoot my way out of this kind of thing way. That almost never occurs in this book. She always has a bit of a plan. She's always thinking 3 steps ahead and looking at the angles and checking the exits and, trying to be as methodical in a creative way as possible.
Sounds like Joe. He looks like the cover too, right?
He looks just. You put Joe in a dress. Yeah, you put Joe in a dress. It's basically.
Who's watching?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Hey, I got the legs for it.
Yeah, you sue for that cover work. That's your picture. That's for sure.
That's my tight waist.
Yeah. Are you the type of writer then? Are you herring your character? Do you hear Havelock in your head? Do you see her? Do you feel her? Or is it a distant relationship?
I think in that particular case, there's a distant relationship with all the other characters, but Eliana, I felt like I had a really good grasp on who I wanted her to be. I didn't want her just to be a female James Bond, because it's a little bit trite and it's been done. But I did want her to stand out in a way that was unique. Because, I mean, there's always been a lot of strong female protagonists in different kinds of genres, including spy thrillers, like Red Sparrow and those kinds of books. But I really liked Eliana to be somebody who was perfectly in control until she wasn't. And even when she wasn't, like, all of her motivation was to try and get back into control. So I think I always had this feeling about that character that I could write her very, very confidently, especially from first person, which was a stretch at first. But it was something that after a couple of chapters, it came very easily.
What do you think of when I say the word storyteller?
Ooh, that's a loaded, broad-ass question, Joe.
I know, because I'm a loaded, broad-ass guy, especially the broad-ass part.
And he's loaded, too.
Yeah. No, but your career has been storytelling. You know, you tell this, you're a screenwriter, you write the other short stories and paranormal and surreal. I read up on it. I haven't read Havelock, it's brand new. But I have a sense from you of being a storyteller. So I'm wondering what it is about that. Do you see yourself as one? What does it mean to be a storyteller?
The whole concept of being a storyteller, I think it's been something that has broken down barriers throughout time. Way back to when people were scratching, symbols on cave walls. They were communicating in a way that was something different. And storytelling, for better or for worse, has been, it's been told, stories have been told in a similar way for hundreds of years. But it's something that kind of unifies us and breaks down a lot of barriers in communication, in interpersonal relationships. I've always loved reading stories. I've loved telling stories in different formats. I like the opportunity that I have these days to write novels, to write comic books, to write screenplays, to go to writing conferences and speak to audiences about the art of storytelling and what it means to be a storyteller and the importance of it to humanity, to life, to creativity. It really is something that is very near and dear to my heart. So it's a great question, but I could talk about it for hours and hours. I think what it means to be a storyteller in today's day and age is that we all have this crazy opportunity to tell our stories, way more avenues than we ever had before. I mean, even 20, 25 years ago, we did not have the same channels, the same platforms that exist today. So if you have a story to tell, I believe people should tell their story in whatever way is the most comfortable to them.
When you write your stories, are you a visual writer?
Yeah, because I came from a screenwriting background. My first novel, Death, the Devil, and the Goldfish, I got comments all the time about everything feels like a scene in a movie. I learned screenwriting craft first, and then I transitioned to novel writing, and so a lot of the visual elements of screenwriting and story structure transitioned into my novel writing, which was helpful for Havelok, because I did want it to play out in a scenic kind of formation. But that's continued to today. I'm co-writing a series right now of Shakespearean retellings that have been modernized with awesome co-author Finian Burnett. And even then, the way that we're breaking down chapters and the way we're bleeding chapters together is very, very scene-worthy as far as being very movie-centric, I suppose. I think it's a great way to tell the story. I think movies are fantastic when they're done well. I've always leaned into that, and I like that my writing kind of skews that way.
So the evil in the book, the bad character or the bad thing that happens, how do you develop that? How do you write that?
Well, I read all about Joe. I was like, this would be a perfect villain.
Read my bio. Talk to my wife. Kids, grandkids.
Anybody who's ever met you.
That lives.
Cicadas.
The ones that are still alive, of course.
Yes.
Man, writing villains is fun. Villains are just fun characters. Villains are almost always more fun to write and develop than the heroes are. So in this particular case, I needed somebody who had been good at some point in his life, that would make the perfect foil for, my hero in this particular case, who was willing to go to great lengths and was willing to take the risks and the chances. But the villain had to be somebody who was so power hungry and so bent on what they wanted, and who considered themselves to be somebody who was also 3 steps ahead of the game at all times. And then to have that unravel in the book for them to make them desperate and make the wrong move, or maybe the right move. I don't want to spoil the book. I just like the idea of a villain who's willing to take those chances and sacrifice others without even a second thought to what they're doing. I like that in my villains. I like those kinds.
Drawing from your own experience, that's all.
Yeah, all the villains I've met, all my film school instructors.
You kill those off, right? That's Al's voice.
Yeah, well, that's right.
So at the end of the day, are you writing for pure entertainment, or do you have a subtext or some sort of a meaning underneath the story?
Well, money. I mean, I'm writing for money, Alan. I mean, that's really the...
Well...
Money? Writer? What?
Yeah.
You are a horror writer.
That's true. In the end, it's tricky to explain because I'm not a typical author in that I don't really stick to one genre. I mean, I've written horror and paranormal fantasy. I've written spy thriller. I've written urban fantasy, satirical fiction. I've written fairy tale fantasy with a whimsical slant. I have a high fantasy that I've had a work in progress for a while, and a sci-fi that my co-author and I are looking to maybe work on too. The Shakespeare retellings, like, it's all different. I'm not a single genre writer, so what am I trying to convey with my stories? Just entertainment value. I think stories are wonderful ways, like I said, to unify and create community, inspire, make people laugh, make them cry. I just want those reactions, so I guess I'm writing for reactions all the time. For good or bad, I don't care. If people love it or hate it, you can't please everybody anyways.
Eliana, are you going to continue with this character then? Are you going to use her again? Are you going to go further? Or is it just a one and done?
Ideally, it's a quadrilogy. I had 4 books sketched out for this series. I would like to certainly write the second one and see how it all goes. My current schedule, that probably isn't going to happen until into next year, but yeah, I would like to continue this story. I like that character, and it does end with a certain amount of open-endedness in the first novel, so yeah, I would like to continue this.
You haven't planned out?
Up to 4.
We just already booked the book.
Yeah, no,
so you know how it ends.
Yeah, I've got a pretty good idea where it all ends up. But again, I'm also tap dancing around an existing mythology of James Bond, but not being able to say, write the name James Bond either. So
you can't write it. Yeah, famous British. Oh, you can't even use 07, right?
I couldn't use. It was a great conversation. They were so sweet at the Inflamming Estate when I had this conversation with them, and they loved the idea. And they said, "Okay, well, you can't say James Bond, you can't say 007, you can't use the call signs for M and Q, but you can use License to Kill, MI6's fair open game. You can use anything that was public domain." As far as the short stories were concerned. So there was bits and pieces I could drop. So there's a ton of Easter eggs in the book anyways, and it's fairly obvious if you read it kind of who is being alluded to in certain cases, but it stands on its own. Even if you didn't know James Bond mythology, it would still play out just as it plays out with no issues.
So since you write across different genre, which is actually kind of rare, usually I write espionage like I am, and I'm breaking out into suspense, or I'm trying a police procedural, and I want to do something else just for the fun of it. But you're like all up against the wall. You're splattered against the wall. That's the way to put it. How do you view the end reader audience then? How do you know who they are, what they're going to like, or maybe people who follow you as a writer, if there's that one person, how they react to what you're writing? Do you think about them?
I do, because I come from a marketing background, and thinking about target audiences, something that is always at the forefront of my brain. It's been kind of interesting to see how different readers have accepted the different types and styles of my work. People who loved Death, the Devil, and the Goldfish, my first novel, didn't necessarily like my second novel, which was a reimagining of fairy tales. But they did love the Werewolf series that I wrote. It's really... I guess you can't dictate what people are going to like and what they're not going to like. So I think about it to the point of I'm trying to write something that's going to be entertaining to the audience. And I think if people like my writing style is still my writing style. And there's going to be elements of that in anything that I write, no matter what the genre is. So I like to keep that consistent, and I kind of hope that people will, enjoy that consistency. But in the end, I have all these different ideas, and I like playing in these different sandboxes. So I'm hoping readers will follow me into, whatever sandbox I play in, but there's never a guarantee on that. But if you spend all your time worrying about what the reader is going to think, then you're never going to write anything, especially in today's day and age where, everything is a booby trap and court of popular opinion is always out to get you.
So are there things that you keep out? Thinking about the court of public opinion, do you I always answer this question. I don't say censor or cancel, but there are things, the sensitivities of the time that you just keep out?
No, I don't think so. I think I put everything in there. I mean, if it's put through the frame of storytelling and fiction, there's not much you shouldn't be allowed to do, I don't think. People have to accept that it's fiction. I mean, they're in Havelok, the villain does horrible things. I would never do those horrible things. But through the framework of that story, then, yeah, I mean, I came up with it. I guess it was in my brain. It doesn't mean I would ever go out and do those things. So, no, I like to put it on the page and let the reader decide what they will and won't accept. Even now, I'm interviewing narrators for the audiobook, and one of them was questioning some of the sexuality in it. Like how steamy are the sex scenes, based on their comfortability of how they would like to read it or not read it, I suppose.
Well, you get Joe to do that. He's writing an erotica book right now. So
I'm a good moaner.
I thought that was more like a memoir that he's doing.
Yeah, well, that is, but he's using a different name.
It's called short story. I'll leave it at that.
Then in the 4 books that you're going to have Havelock in, is it more following her, all that? Are you kind of growing your character? Is that the point of the 4 books?
Yeah. MI6 is no more at the end of book 1, which I don't think is a horrible spoiler to share, because it's in disarray at the beginning of the book. So the way that world transitions and the world that I'm trying to create in that book series, I think it's something that it is all centered around Eliana's journey and the reason that she infiltrated MI6 in the first place, but then them kind of adopting her in under this new framework is obviously a big part of that story, and how she would deal with bureaucracy in a different way than somebody who was actually employed in that system. I think is going to be a big part of it. But I also want to keep, the mystery thread going. I want the main plot points to be revealed over those 4 books, heading towards, what the finale is kind of going to be and where her character ends up being at the end of that particular journey. But I think it will end with 4 books.
So what do you think the biggest difference is for you for writing a book as compared to what you were doing before, screenplays and stuff like that? What's the biggest challenge?
I don't know that there's that much difference between it. The story structure is the same. The plot points all hit the same places. The biggest difference is the visual component, which I still try to incorporate a lot into my novel writing anyway, but screenwriting is so limited. You can only put down on the paper what the audience is going to see. I'm currently working on a horror screenplay for a friend in Vancouver. It's a weird, switch to flip in your brain that what you're putting down in there can only be whatever the audience that you're going to see on the screen. You can't play around with any kind of internal narrative. You can't deal with emotions unless they're showing it on their face or expressing it in dialogue. I found screenwriting to be a lot more restrictive in that sense. Novel writing is wide open. I found a lot less challenges going from screenwriting to novel writing than if I'd gone the other way. So if anything, I think screenwriting only helped enrich my novel writing ability, whereas if I went the other way, I think it'd been very jarring, I think.
Yeah, we've heard that from other authors who go across genre. I want to ask one question going back just for a second, because you use the word plot points and plot, story. In writing an espionage novel, so I know a lot of them, they're trying to make the story topical. It's China, it's nuclear bombs, it's AI, it's whatever. Were you, in building your character and creating a story visually, thinking topicality? It needs to be about, or take your pick, or was it just the plot was there to drive the character?
It was a certain amount of research I did when I started to build that on 2 different fields. One was on the technology side with this whole trigger effect concept, because I had read a bunch of articles out of Australia where they were experimenting with nanotechnology that could do all kinds of crazy stuff, which is like the smallest microscopic robotic elements that could be pre-programmed. And they were using it for airbags in cars, where in the case of an accident, it was theoretical at the time, a car would crash and the nanoparticles that were in the car would automatically freeze and hold the driver in place so that they wouldn't sustain any injuries. So in sense, it would be far more effective than an airbag would be. I thought if you could pre-program something like that, then it was just a hop, skip, and a jump to take that to something that would work internally in the body. And I know they've experimented with it, as far as exploring the biology of primates and all that kind of stuff. So I did that kind of research. On the actual espionage side of it, I did look at what the current, at that particular point, 2015-ish, what the current state was of Karachi, Pakistan, where there was a lot of arms dealing, and what, was going on with the Golden Triangle at that particular point. So I tried to keep it topical to a point, but I also twisted on his head for the sake of writing. And fiction. And I didn't want it to be like purely like, this is going to be a political statement about this or a political statement about that. I really did. It's not my nature, not really my interest either. And I didn't want to insult anybody by, going into those heavy issues without me actually having any experience in it or, being truly passionate about those things. I did fictionalize a lot of it, but I did do the base research to figure out, where was, the main arms dealership happening in the Middle East at that particular point. Like, what were the actual real issues that, were happening that with dictatorship, what had happened in Burma at that particular time. I did go into those elements, and then I fictionalized and twisted things to fit into the plot of my story, basically. Do you keep it more specifically topical when you write, Joe? Or do you? Well,
like you, I in my Spy Devils series, the Chinese are the bad guys, I guess, and there's other pieces, and China's topical, right? But I don't make it like, oh, they're taking over. Well, I did have mentioned the Southeast Asia, things like that, but they are an aggressive intelligence operation, and so I use that as the sort of basis underneath. Like corporate espionage and things like that. So but it's not the point. The point for me, I got to drive characters. The plot is there to help me drive the character, right? And if I need them to do something, I try to be as close to real as I can get in every way. If there's something happening somewhere in the world, I found an article, I did a story on it, but my point is not to be, big bad Chinese or whatever it might be, or big bad government. It's the way to drive action and to drive the character's development. That's kind of mine. And I'm getting away from espionage, and it's all character. I'm having people read my first 100 pages. I never had anybody read the first 100 pages of the espionage books. Like you, I've gone to first person female, and it's exactly like you. A couple chapters, you start hitting the ground. But my daughters, my wife, and people like that are reading it saying, nah, because I need to learn. But it's character-driven. Plot. And actually, the plot, you teach communications, right?
Marketing, communication theory, yeah.
Marketing, communication. So I do social media and misinformation. Those are the topical. It is topical on those issues. As of today, type of social media, current events. So yes, but not, the espionage stuff was there. I find the suspense stuff is actually a little bit more. The idea came from a topical contemporary element.
But I think that's just escaping that's the escapism piece, though, right? I mean, we all live in the real world, and we all hear about horrible things happening in different parts of the world. I didn't want to, I've never ever wanted to write from the standpoint of this is a soapbox to bring light to those things. I write for entertainment value and not for that realism. And the same reason I read for an escape. I don't read much of the news because for one thing, it's miserable and depressing. But for another, if I'm going to read, I want to read for entertainment. I want that escapism. I don't want to, read something that's based on, I don't read a lot of true crime or true life stories. I like the fictionalized stuff. That's what drives me.
Sorry, Al.
There goes my book.
Al writes true crime.
Sorry, I know. I'm sorry I read that about you. I apologize.
Al, you're irrelevant.
Yeah. 32 books down, nothing to go.
Let the real authors talk. You 32 book guys who've got TV deals and everything else. You just get out of here.
Yeah, let me step aside here. Sad. I'm sad. I know. I don't write. I'm a terrible writer. So
you're problem. Great. Read Al's books. You'll learn how to write in a certain genre. I mean, kind of like what Andrew's saying, though. I don't know if I can write horror. I don't think that way. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm not exactly sure how it would work. I know I can write suspense because there's a relationship between suspense and espionage. I don't think I can do true crime. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I do true crime, but the relationship between suspense and thrillers and horror is a thin line. You could easily transition over to that because it's a lot of the same mechanisms. It's a lot of the same mystery elements. All you're doing differently is you're building in a different theme, a different framework. Like every horror story has a very specific formula that follows, which is, the fear. It's the fear piece. What is the fear? How is it represented? And that is basically the key and the big difference between thrillers and horror. It's a hop, skip, and a jump. You can definitely do a jump.
Yeah, I think there's it's creating the story and creating that fear. That's just for the sake of no one cares. The chapter I just wrote in my book was called Thin Line. It's about the idea of thin line between this and that as part of my book, because it is, right? Now, there's a big broad line, I think, to true crime, because that's not fiction, and it takes a different level of research and better writing like Al. But I'm not kidding. But I agree with you that there are elements that cut across genre and suspense for drawing in the reader and holding them there, making them want to turn the page is, in a fictionalized way, is universal.
I think so. I think a lot of genres do cross over. Like a lot of actors have always said, if you can act in comedies, you can act in dramas, because comedy is so much about the timing and about doing the setup, that 1, 2, and then whatever the punchline is. And if you can do that, you can also hit those exact same dramatic beats when you're doing hard drama too. Same with writing. If you can, infuse humor into your work, then it's not that dissimilar to actually writing pretty heavy dramatic prose. You're still hitting that 1-2 punch with whatever the finality is. I think there's a lot of crossover with genre. I think a lot of people say, oh, I could never write that genre. I say, if you think about it a little bit, chances are you could, with just a little bit of a twist. It doesn't take much.
And all it takes for the last comment is do it.
Yeah.
Practice and experience. Yeah. Don't tell me you can't do it. And if you do it lousy the first time, who cares? Just do it.
Yeah, it's all a learning experience. You're never going to know if you don't try it. Like, give it a shot. I tried straight horror, and I couldn't actually do it, because I'm too sarcastic. There's humor elements in horror for levity that I had a hard time. And my agent says, you need to rewrite this as a middle grade, which became my werewolf series. And that was meant to be like a straight up horror werewolf series. And it became a whimsical middle grade coming of age, zero to hero kind of story instead.
Are you big on interacting with people on social media? Do you have a website? Where do people?
Yes, I am interactive on those. As somebody who teaches marketing, it's impossible for me to ignore. And if you're an author in today's day and age, you can't ignore social media. As much of a horror story of a time suck that it is, like, we're just stuck with it these days. It's the foundational piece. It's where people go to find you. It's where they go and find the human behind the stories. And so you have to be interactive. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram as my primary ones, but I also have a Twitter account, TikTok. I have a Patreon that I'm currently overhauling. My website is my main hub where you can find everything. I'm on all that stuff. And honestly, if I spend half the time that I spend on those platforms actually writing, I'd finish books way faster.
The book, Havelok, our guest, Andrew Buckley. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.